Okay, Chris Speaks back here today with one of the legendary figures in America. Somebody I have a great respect for, the iconic Donald Watkins. And we're going to talk about Eric Ramsey today. Mr. Watkins, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you, Chris?
I'm great. Thanks for coming back on. So, Mr. Watkins, almost 35 years ago,
Yes.
um, Eric Ramsey released some bombshell tapes that left the Auburn football program in shambles. And
Right.
you wrote an article about an op-ed about how he led to NIL. Now we've been
Yes.
having, was it because of his testimony before the congressional committee?
I think that, Chris, change in life is always evolutionary. It's not revolutionary. And so I think when Eric Ramsey's story went public, and it was national news, it was also a 60-minute story, it introduced the question of whether athletes should be paid. That was the first
Mhm.
time that question was raised. Should we legitimately pay these people? We've been paying them under the table forever. You remember
Yeah.
SMU's football
Hmm.
program was killed because they were just simply buying players. They had a semi-pro operation, but everybody was doing it and everybody knew it. And so Eric's played out on the highest stage in national media and international media. And so, and then he moved on with his education, his career, but the question never left. And then Eric was called to Congress to testify. Do we need to go ahead and change the way the uh, NCAA works? And do we need to compensate players at the collegiate level? And the old argument was that they're on a scholarship, they get a free education, and this is not professional sports. And that argument appealed to a lot of people for a long time. But with the advent of multimedia, with the advent of sports content and the bidding for airing sports content, and coaches started to make, multi-million-dollar packages, multi-deal packages, and as the public saw, just a D1 a coach making, $5 to $7 million a year, but the players are just, getting a scholarship. Yeah, the scholarship is valuable. Yes, the education is valuable, but college sports had become a money-making enterprise. It was viewed as a business. Everybody had a lawyer, everybody had an agent, everybody was profiteering off of this, legitimately profiteering off of it, except the players who were producing the content. So it's been an evolution, but we finally got there. And even when we got there with name, image, and likeness, it was so new, the colleges were not prepared for, okay, how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to generate the money? Where is it coming from? Are we going to go around begging, the big boosters for the money? And how are we going to distribute it in a fair manner? So I noticed that the recent settlement, I think they call it the House settlement, named after the plaintiff who brought the lawsuit, is going to allow for universities to just make direct payments to athletes. And I think, 35 years in the making, but we finally arrived at a system where every participant who is in that kitchen making that pie and that is sold to every media outlet in the world will now benefit from that. And I don't see anything wrong with that. It should have always been that way. Once we left pure, what do you call it, intercollegiate sports, where you're just playing for fun. It's not a business. It's, we go down to the handball and play in front of a crowd just for the thrill of the crowd. But once it became a business through radio broadcast, TV broadcast, cable, every way imaginable to distribute content, then it was time to pay the players legitimately and equitably. I think they still have to work out the equitable aspects of that, but that's a process. They'll get there, and I'm glad that Eric, even though people bashed him at the time, opened that door for that discussion and went to Congress. And it was a good session in Congress. And that was the first public debate. Do we need to pay these players? Obviously, the NCAA was opposed to that, as well as a lot of college coaches who were benefiting from the money and didn't have to split it with anybody. So yeah, he was a big factor. That's why I wrote that article, because people have forgotten how this subject was unveiled to the American public.
But why go about the way he did? Why make these tapes, and why take down the Auburn football team? Because what it was to me was,
well, wait a minute, hold on, let's get it straight.
okay,
You can't take down a program if you're not the one who has to adhere to the rules. The people who administer the program at the point in time, were members of the NCAA. They're the ones who have the obligation to comply with the rules. It's not the student. It's the people who are paid, the athletic directors. I mean, they're paid a lot of money to make sure that the programs comply with the rules. If you don't want to comply with the rules, get out of the NCAA. Well, nobody wanted to do that. It was just, yeah, we want to pay him. We just don't want to do it legitimately. So anyway, you ask why was he making tapes? It started out with an essay he had written in an English class, and he was critiquing the experience of Black athletes as opposed to white athletes. Like, for example, summer jobs, Black athletes were getting the, what do you call it? Laborer kind of jobs, go work buildings and grounds, cut grass. The white athletes would be placed as interns in businesses like insurance companies. I can't remember the one that used to make athletic gear, not too far from Auburn. But it started with that. And then the professor that he turned that paper in to was non-renewed. And the professor, without his permission, gave that essay paper to the student newspaper who published it. And once it was published, he caught pure hell for unveiling, the situation that was written in an essay. And from that point on, he let it be known, look, I chronicled this stuff. It's just not me saying it. I chronicled this stuff. He probably had about 300, what do you call them, micro cassette tapes, the little small ones at the time.
Yeah, I remember
On
that,
just about every subject you could imagine. And some of the subjects were so sensitive and controversial to this day. I never released them. They were too explosive for Alabama culture and any culture, yes. And so we stayed away from those, and we just kept it on. Okay, pay to play. You go catch some touchdowns, you get your money, you get your stakes, you get a car finance. That Bobby Louder's bank at that time. What was that? Colonial Bank. And Bobby Louder was chairman of the board for a long time of Auburn University. So I don't want people to say the athlete has the duty to comply. No, they got a whole administrative system set up, and those are the people who get paid to comply with the rules and regulations. And it's unfair to shift that to 18, 19, 20-year-old kids who come from nothing when you get paid to enforce the rules. And you're the one who's breaking them. Yes. Okay.
Fair enough. But was Eric not going and seeking out cash payments to get help with a child that?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, well, I'm not.
Because I listened to 60 Minute
about that. He asked for money. Yes, he had a family, and he had a child at the time, and he was married, which was at the time frowned upon. I'm just going to leave it there. Having a family and being a student athlete when he was going through, when was that, in the 80s? I can't remember. No,
80,
late
80s through 90.
Yeah, that was frowned upon, especially the child part.
So were they not trying to help out this player who was needing help to pay for his family?
That's like saying, I got somebody that needs pain medicine, so I'm gonna get a junkie off the street to give it to him rather than I take him to a hospital, get him diagnosed, and have a legal prescription. Now, which one are you really supposed to do? You care about somebody, right? You care about them. Mm-hmm. They in pain, need help, whatever it is. There are legitimate ways to help people. And there are illegitimate ways to help people. So which one are you going to choose? You're getting paid from an administrative standpoint to do the legitimate way. What's wrong with doing the legitimate way? Nobody really answers that question other than I like Auburn football. Hell, I like Auburn football. But I also like honesty and integrity. And I don't, Chris, what I have a problem with, I cannot stand situational ethics. If it's somebody, I like, I don't want to upset the apple cart. If somebody I disagree with, I'll, put the spotlight on them. I don't do that. I just got one standard. Yeah, everybody knows what the rules are. Let's adhere to them. There are ways to help people. There are 1,000 different ways to help people legitimately.
Why
Now,
wait
it's
until
easy. You go to these impoverished neighborhoods, you get these kids because they have athletic ability, and now it's easy to help them. You can give them NIL money. You can take care of the parents. It's easy to help now. Back then, it was not as easy to help, but they were helping anyway.
So why wait until after he's cut by the Kansas City Chiefs before he releases these tapes?
Now, I think he waited until after he was off Auburn's campus.
Yeah, he'd been cut by the Kansas City Chiefs after he was not going to have an NFL career.
But he didn't wait long after his essay was published, and the backlash started from the publication of the essay. So the timing is more to that than whether he got cut by the Kansas City Chiefs.
He said in the 60 Minutes interview, I listened to it twice this morning again, that he was hoping to get a book deal or a movie deal out of this. So you don't think any of this was financially?
He got neither.
I understand that, but do you not think this was financially motivated by him?
I don't think it was motivated by finance, but if he could have gotten a book deal, I'm sure he would have appreciated. What he did get out of it was a college degree. You remember he went back and graduated under difficult circumstances, and he got a wonderful career. He's a very successful businessman in LA. He's in the security business. He's producing films. He's very successful. He's a very smart individual. Number one, I can't really speak to athletic ability because I didn't follow his football career while he was at Auburn. He must have had some talent, or they wouldn't have put him on scholarship. But I have followed his business career, and I don't know how long he's been out since '92. He graduated, I believe. So he's been successful since '92, whatever the period of time that is.
So, touching on his essay, now he talked about the slave mentality of the athletics. Is that talking about how they were the university was making money?
The gist of it was this: he went there because he promised his grandmother he'd get a college education. Football was just how he was going to pay for it, or how Auburn offered to pay for it. And so he committed to the grandmother who died before he could complete his education, that he was going to do that. So he was one of the few football players who graduated. At that period, they didn't recruit you to be, really educated. They recruited you to be eligible so that you could play. Well, anyway, when he enrolled, he wanted real classes. I can't remember what his major was now. He didn't want the basket weaving stuff to keep you eligible.
Right.
He wanted the real stuff, real substantive classes. And he was steered toward the easy stuff. And then he asked, can I just schedule my own classes? Because, I know what I'm trying to get out of this process. And he eventually did that. So his education, to his credit, was mostly due to his input on academic guidance and stuff like that, and not on whatever the folks they had to keep you eligible to play. So he pointed that out. I don't know if you call that tracking. I don't know what it would be called in educational circles, where they put you on a slower, lower track, in terms of educational achievement to keep you eligible. But that was one of the things. Then, in the summer months, all of them got jobs. The athletic department helped to place them in jobs. And so that was the second observation he was making. they got the manual labor kind of jobs. And he was saying that the white players were getting the ones that connected you with businesses, the one that would have value to you after, your football life is over, football career is over. So it wasn't, the observations in the essay were not even made in a nasty fashion. It was more in the analytical stuff. I think he had numbers in there, and I haven't seen it in a long time, but it was what you write for an English class. And but when it was published, that's when the backlash, hey, you lucky to be here, and you ought to be thankful, and whatever we give you, you're better off than where you were in Rosedale, the little community in Birmingham, between Birmingham, I think Homewood, little black community. So it was like,
Yeah, somewhere around Homewood.
yeah, it's in Homewood, yeah. So it was just a nasty, nasty reaction. Well, Eric is not lacking in confidence, and he certainly is not a punk. So if you push him, he's going to push back. And they did. They pushed him, and he pushed back.
Now, is that what he meant when you talk about the black students going into the manual jobs, the white students getting office jobs? Is that what he meant by the racism he was experiencing?
Yes, he was comparing it to disparate treatment. It wasn't that they didn't care about him. It was, this is what we think you're capable of doing. Go over here where you can make some money about an hour and lift some crates and stuff like that. And the whole time I've known him, and I've known him since 91 or 92, it's always been the development of his mind. Always. It's just always learning, always learning, always. Explain to me the principle of this, and what are people trying to accomplish by this? And it's always that, the whole time, for decades. 4 decades. He's one of
now. He said
he's one of the smartest guys I know. Go ahead.
When he said he was being treated like a piece of meat, is that because he was an athlete and not being treated as a student as well?
I think that's a good characterization, Chris. Rather than a holistic thing, he was treated as an athlete, and you just out there to, move the ball. Or stop moving the ball.
Let me ask this: Why did he need to go get probably one of the most high-profile attorneys in America to represent him?
I'm trying to remember. They had called to make an appointment, and actually they called several times. And at the time, I had offices in Birmingham and in Montgomery. And so when I knew I was going to Montgomery, because I was spending most of my time in Birmingham working with Arrington, I made an appointment with him, and he came and he showed me what he had. And I was making the appointment not to take his case, just to, try to give him some advice to steer him in another direction. And then after he left, maybe a day or so after he left, then I started getting these threatening calls to my office in Montgomery. And the people who know me, because obviously the callers didn't know me, but I could tell they were whites. And it's just nasty stuff. It's not unlike stuff I had gotten before, in handling various controversial cases. But the one thing about me, the quickest way to get me to lock into a mission, you threaten me or you threaten my family, then it's my job to take your ass down. That's just that's the way I work. I don't mind debate. We can debate all the time. We don't even have to agree on stuff. And but when you threaten me or you threaten my family, then that's a whole different ball game. I'm not, I don't play that ever. Never have.
I share those sentiments too. I mean, somebody's threatened me, it just takes a
then
whole
I
different
call
level
them back and say, hey, look, I'll represent you. I'll represent you. Now they're not fighting you, they're fighting me. And that's I'm trained to fight. I'm trained to fight.
So you feel that Eric did this to benefit other student athletes down the road? This wasn't something for spite?
From day one, it was never spite. It was never selfishness. It was almost like a dignity thing. Look, it it's good to pay athletes if you believe that they're part of your program, an integral part of your program. But why won't they do it legally? It was always his question. Why won't they just do it legally? We're making a lot of money for them. Why won't they do it legally? Well, hell, then no school wanted to be out there advocating at that time for a change in the rule to make these guys partners in progress. Chris, I can't think of any organization where the people who are monopolizing the money voluntarily say, hey, we're going to include you in this money. I can't think of a soul that does that without advocacy from the left out group. And always, in anything, any situation, always, whenever the first representatives of the left out group come and say, can we have a piece of the pie too for all of us who make this possible for you? Then the group that's getting the money always attacks the left out group. I don't care what context you put it in. That's just the way life works. Nobody wants to split the money if they don't have to. That's the way life works.
Eric said that he was discouraged from getting an education. I guess that meant we were talking about taking the easy classes. Do you think that he envisioned anything like this, where I think last year 4,300 student athletes changed schools? And is that not hurting the education too?
Yeah, it's hurting. Look, the two things that I thought were killing college sports now, the transfer portal, where you just get there, I don't like this, I'm gone, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no loyalty to the program.
Right.
Even if you like the school, there's no loyalty. It's all about me now. The pendulum has swung all the way to the other side now. It's all about me.
Right.
It's nothing about team. It's nothing about, hey, I just came out of high school. I'm 17 and 18 years old. Can you develop my skills? Because I want to make a long career out of this profession, right? And
right.
And now people are demanding money, and they haven't, this is before they establish their worth, right? All of high school career means is, hey, here's my resume. This is what I was able to do at a lower level. So I should have the potential to do it at a higher level if you coach me up, right? And so, but it doesn't mean you have this, $5-6 million value right now. You haven't thrown one ball out there at the college level in front of 100,000 people with intense competition out there. And I just think there's a correction that has to be made. And I would be in favor of the old transfer rule. You get there, you want to transfer again, you lay out a year. Because you got to get these people to stay there so they can be coached up. Or they're not going to, if they're not coached up, if they're only playing for money, no team spirit, then it's gonna degrade the quality of the professional, the NFL, for those who get there, because they won't know anything other than that paradigm. They haven't really been coached up. You can say what you want to about Nick Saban. Some people love him, some people hate him, right? Yeah, I love him too. But Nick Saban could see your raw potential at the high school level, and he didn't confer prima donna status on you. You'd have to come there and you have to learn his system, learn his techniques, learn his fundamentals. You may ride the bench for a year or two. You may be a 5-star high school athlete riding the bench for a year or two, right? But one thing you did know is when you left there, he was going to try to make sure you graduated, because he would be at the graduation, standing in the hall, waiting on all of those football players to come off the stage to take the group picture with them, separate from the general commencement group. And number two, if you made it to the pros, you had the fundamentals to be successful. Now, whether you had the focus to do that, that's an individual thing, but you had the fundamentals. Nobody was going to question if you came through a Nick Saban program and you started there and you were part of this national championship team and that national championship, whether you had the fundamentals, hell yeah, you got the fundamentals, or you wouldn't have been there. So everybody in the pros trusted that process. You don't have that anymore. All I know now is that you commanded a lot of money in college. I don't know how good you are in a team effort because you were focused on getting your money as an individual player. And whether you can perform because you're not sitting there like a Tom Brady studying game film and all of your off time. You're out partying, buying chains, buying Mercedes Benzes, Bentleys, all that stuff, all of the what I call the dumb stuff. And so I don't know when these kids get there to the pros now, I don't know what level of competition they'll be able to perform. I
Yeah, I
don't
was
think
just
it's going to
discussing
be the Nick
somebody.
Saban level. I don't think that's going to happen.
Oh yeah, I was just discussing basically what you said that with a couple of days ago. Somebody, there's no value on being an Auburn Tiger or Alabama Crimson Tide or Ohio State Buckeye anymore. It's all about the money. These guys are
That's
just hired
correct.
guns,
That's
and they're
correct.
paying, and they're having to, with them transferring, every 6 months, they're having to play such a vanilla type offense and defense that when they get to the next level, they're, like I said, they're not going to be coached up.
They're not going to be coached up, but they're going to degrade the NFL level. They're going to degrade
Yeah,
it. If you're not coached up, look, I watch lawyers, right? I watch lawyers.
yeah.
This is my profession. I went to law school. I did pretty good in law school. Now I was good. And I knew I was going to do good in law school because I did good in undergrad school, right? I went to a big college, 25,000 people. I was there one quarter without a scholarship. After the first quarter, I was Dean's List and scholarship all the way, right? So, could go to any law school. Got accepted to a bunch of them, right? Because I didn't have a problem with the law school admissions test, right? That standard test. That was just one more test to me. It was nothing to dread. So at every level, I was being coached up. Then I graduate, right, from law school, passed the bar, first time out, passed the bar. What I did and what was done for people in my generation, I knew I wanted to be a litigator, right? Just like you're a soldier. I wanted to be a litigator. So a litigator's job is to go into the gladiator pit and you got to kill whoever's on the other side. One of y'all is walking out, right? Only one is walking out. The other one's going to be laying there in a pool of blood, right? So that's a skilled position. That's a skilled profession. And you don't learn that skill in law school. You don't learn it in books. You learn it by going and watching the best of the litigators in the state. Black, white, it didn't matter. And the interesting about it, Chris, everybody I asked to help me, to train me, I'm talking about white lawyers, black lawyers, every one of them, without hesitation, open up their minds, open up their hearts, open up their library of techniques to me, and without a thought, and were honored that I was asking them. And so it took me about 4 years of going to watch other people try cases, right? And they break down techniques to me and fundamentals of how to win, right? From everything, from the pleadings you file to how you deal with hostile judges, how you deal with racist jurors. Because when I started, all the jurors were all white, right? But I had to win anyway, no matter who they were. And so that just came down to a matter of how do you communicate with a group that's totally different from you, but the message has to be the same. So what is missing today? People coming out of law school today, they're not learning anything. They're not being mentored. They're not being trained. They're at a level of weakness today that, like, it's disgusting. It's just, it's disgusting. I don't even like to be around it. It's at such a low level of lawyering today. I personally don't like to be around it. I prefer to tell people, look, I'm either a journalist or a businessman. I can't deal with that. People send me stuff all the time, right? Stuff that they found, did my lawyer do the right thing here and there? Man, I have had cases where you go to the docket sheet. Do you know what a docket sheet is? That's like a chronology of everything that was filed in a case. And a layperson can get that too on any case. And you can go from either a criminal, indictment or a civil, complaint and go all the way through. You can see everything that was done, right? Every action that was taken by the lawyer on your side or the lawyer on the other side. And I have noticed over the last 10 to 15 years that there has been a total collapse in the ability to litigate. These folks couldn't litigate their way out of a paper bag. And it's sad, but they can't do it because they were never mentored. They were never trained on how to fight somebody, how to kill somebody. I don't mean literally kill. I mean in terms of techniques for winning a case. So I don't know what that profession is going to be, but I know football is headed in that same damn direction. Same direction.
Where do you think the NIL is going to lead to?
I think it's gonna it's already having good and bad effects, but I think if it is not corrected and there's a equitable distribution system, because not everybody's making the big bucks, right? Like if I was a lineman and I got one of these star quarterbacks behind me and I'm out there bleeding and get stepped on, you know, with the cleats and all that stuff, but all the glory is on somebody else and all the money is going to him and all I'm getting is some hamburgers and Milos. No, man, I couldn't do that. I wouldn't be motivated to do that. I would if the school is not paying me, then my quarterback need to show some generosity like Brady used to do. Brady focused on making sure his offensive line was compensated well, even if he had to give up the money to make that happen, because he was in the pocket, right? And that produced longevity for him. I don't expect these young kids today to think like that, but if they want to make a career out of sports, they better figure out how to get longevity, or you'll be a has-been like so many other people.
Yeah, there's just so much greed in it today. You know, like in the NFL, everybody's wanting,
It's greed.
$4 million
It's pure greed
contract,
now.
$50 million contracts. Like how much, how much more can you need? You just got 30 million last year. You want 32 this year. You want 33 next year. I mean, how much more money can you? I would, like you said,
I think,
moving it
Chris, if
around,
you're a
get players.
superstar, if you're a superstar, let's say you won your high school championship, right? State championship. Let's say you won your college state championship, because they got different divisions in college too. And you go 14, 15 years in the pros and you never even made it to the Super Bowl. You never won a Super Bowl, but you were paid a lot of money. You know, sometimes money is not everything. Sometimes you want to make sure that you were at the zenith of every level you played on. And you can make your money in other ways. You can make your money as a successful businessman, and that platform can launch you into that. But and it launches you better if you won Super Bowls, right? Ask Peyton Manning, ask Tom Brady. It launches you better if you're at the zenith of your game on every level you play.
Yeah, I'd rather be getting me some players around me, as opposed to I don't need, that, like you said, Brady was making sure his offensive linemen were compensated.
It's a team sport. This is not track where you're out there running, the mile by yourself. This is a team sport. You can be no better than the team allows you to be. And it's very complicated now. And everybody's got to buy into the program. That's why I like when Saban says, what is it? Low achievers don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like low achievers. That's true. Not in just football. That's true in life, man. That's true in life. People say, in my personal world, I think that I like to deal with high achievers, high intellectual people, even when they disagree on all the stuff that, my viewpoints, because I like to listen to them express a viewpoint. And more times than not, they enlighten me. And I'm stronger because of that. Because I'm willing to listen to stuff, And then I find that when you are open to listening to people, you will discover you have more in common with them than you realize. So I'm a big believer in getting the static out of my life so I can have a pristine reception of the message that's coming from another, high achiever person or high intellectual person. We're all human beings. We all want the same things.